Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Sarah Rumpf, contributing editor with Mediate. Sarah, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me again.
Since Donald Trump was elected earlier this month, he has been assembling his administration, and he's nominated current lawmakers, former Democrats, and a whole cadre of Fox personalities. So I want to talk with you about arguably some of the most controversial. So let's first talk about, obviously, Matt Gaetz. So the now former congressman took his name out of the running to serve as Donald Trump's attorney general on Thursday, and the move came after there was a debate inside the House Ethics Committee on whether to release a report on sexual misconduct and drug allegations against the Florida Republican. And when making the announcement that he was withdrawing, he said this in part: "It is clear my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of the Trump-Vance transition." What are your thoughts on the whole situation?
Oh man, it's one of those things where it's like where to begin, because this Matt Gaetz saga is so messy and so complicated and has gone on for years. And in a lot of ways, you can see why he was an attractive pick for Trump. He's been a very outspoken loyalist for the president-elect. He's very brash. He doesn't hold back when he's giving his opinions, whether it's on the floor of the House or on a conservative podcast or Fox News. And, I was just talking about this earlier with somebody. His rise in a lot of ways parallels that of Trump, where when he was in the Florida legislature, he was a lot more moderate in the positions he took. He had some bipartisan legislation, especially on issues like marijuana legislation that he was supporting. He was far less aggressive. But as he's gotten more aggressive, as he's staked out more conservative points, he's gotten more fame. They say that the higher, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And this was just a situation where it was a combination of the scandal was too messy and Gaetz has burned too many bridges. The Senate has always been the more deliberative body. They view themselves as a little more senior, the elder statesman to the rowdier House. And this kind of antics, the kind of antics that Gaetz has frequently deployed, didn't go well. And when you've got people on the record like John Cornyn, who is very senior in Republican Senate leadership, saying directly he wants to see the House ethics report, and people saying they have concerns, and we have at least 4 or 5 senators who were hard-nosed, there was no way he was going to be able to get through nomination.
He got more fame. He also seemingly had more enemies, especially within his own party. I mean, we all remember him versus Kevin McCarthy, and he really led the charge to oust Kevin McCarthy. So we know that there were investigations into Matt Gaetz, though, involving sexual misconduct for years. So when did this become the red line for the Trump team?
There was a lot of discussion behind the scenes on that. And I think one of my colleagues, Diana Falzone, should have a report that's coming out today on some insider chatter on that, both Gaetz and Pete Hegseth had assured the Trump team that the noise was not as bad as it was going to get. And I think in some ways, you look at Donald Trump's own history of the many, many women who have accused him of various things, the E. Jean Carroll case that resulted in a civil verdict against him that he did sexually assault her and defame her. And you can kind of understand where maybe the Trump team thought they would be able to shrug this off. But, as we've seen over and over in the past, the Teflon Don ability to slink and slide out of scandal that works for Donald Trump doesn't necessarily work for those who are trying to follow in his footsteps.
It definitely works for Donald Trump, but no one else has really mastered the success of that as well, as we've seen, because Matt Gaetz, now he's resigned from the House. He indicated that he will not be serving in the 119th Congress. He had just recently won re-election. He is out of the job at AG. He withdrew from consideration. So what do you think is next for Matt Gaetz? Does he have any political future? What does that look like?
I mean, I don't think that we've heard the last from him. He's been very popular on the conservative podcast that he's been on. He may want to launch his own. There's been chatter before about him joining a conservative network like Newsmax. And there is always the possibility of him running again for another office. The House Ethics Report is looming. And one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that while the public has not seen that report, every single one of the congressional members on that committee and their key staffers have. And so I just find it, I'm assuming that other Republican members of the House are aware of what's in it. And the interesting thing to keep in mind, how litigation wary people are, and Matt Gaetz is somebody who has independent family wealth and certainly can hire a team of lawyers to badger anybody who defames him. But you look at statements like former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who definitely has a chip on his shoulder about Gaetz. He has said flat out in a number of televised and radio interviews, directly accusing Gaetz of doing these things and saying that he's a creep and different things. And other conservative commentators like Ben Domenech have flat out called him a sex pest and made these accusations without adding the qualifiers, without saying allegedly, reportedly, is accused of, just saying it. So for people, there's so many people who are insiders on this and have seen the discussions and seen the affidavits that these women have put forward and the statements they've given under oath over and over again for years. That's something that is going to be a stumbling block for him. If he ran again, down the road, or if DeSantis appointed him to the soon to be open Senate seat that Marco Rubio will be vacating to become Secretary of State, his nomination is expected to sail through. Whether the House ethics investigation can reattach to a new term is a complicated question, and it wouldn't necessarily apply to him as a senator. So, but again, there's so much of these allegations that are out there. There's court records that are already public, and it is a mess that's not going to go away.
And the allegations are really disturbing. One that was reported yesterday was that a minor said that she had 2 sexual encounters with Gaetz at one event. So he's denied all the allegations. I think it's important to say that. But do you think that this is a litmus test? Do you think that this kind of normalizes other controversial picks of Trump's, where he has someone like a controversial pick, perhaps Dr. Oz or RFK Jr. or someone like that, and they can say, well, hey, at least it's not Matt Gaetz, and it almost makes them look better?
I mean, I was joking on Twitter that about the replacement of former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi to replace Gaetz. Well, she has not been accused of sexual trafficking of teenagers, so that's great. It's an upgrade. Wry jokes aside, it is serious. And again, what we know that's already public. There was a separate civil lawsuit filed by a friend of Gaetz's, and the cell phone records and the login records for the gated community where this former member of the Florida legislature lives show who came in and out of the property by name, because people have to show IDs. And that places both him and Gaetz and these women there. And cell phone records ping at the locations that would indicate that they were there. So, we don't know for sure. There's not none of us were eyewitnesses. There is no video of this incident that allegedly happened on an air hockey table of all absurd things. But there is outside evidence that, kind of connects the dots to these things.
Well, as you mentioned, he was replaced. Now it's Pam Bondi, former Florida Attorney General. You're a Floridian. What do Floridians make of her? What do you know about her? What do you make of this pick?
So Pam Bondi is somebody that, again, like Gaetz, like Trump, followed a similar path to prominence in Republican politics. She was a local prosecutor in the Tampa area, and she is very well spoken and very good on camera. And she started making Fox News appearances and, giving commentary on a lot of hot topic issues and crime cases that were in the news. And, I remember in the Republican primary, in the original primary, I voted for one of her opponents that I knew better, who I felt was a more experienced and serious candidate. But Bondi ran away with that primary just because she had so much better name recognition. She got a lot of support from Republicans who felt that she was a good spokesperson for Republican causes. That's not to say that she hasn't had issues and scandals. The ongoing questions about what really happened with the Trump University investigation. And that's where people who signed up for those classes believed that they would be getting, a good curriculum that would help them make a living and make money. And it was pretty much a scam. And New York prosecuted a successful case against Trump University. And there were similar complaints made in Florida. I believe there were 22 of them that were sent to the Florida Attorney General's office. And Bondi originally acknowledged those and then tried to downplay it and said there was only one complaint. She dropped pursuing it after Trump, through his charity, donated $25,000 to her campaign. That was later found to be an improper donation because you can't donate to political campaigns from certain nonprofits. I mean, it's a complicated mess. I find it a little questionable whether you can really buy off a Florida politician for $25,000, considering how expensive all of our, campaigns are, especially on a statewide level. I mean, just one media market is millions of dollars. So running statewide is such a colossal thing. The idea that you can be bought off for $25,000, I don't quite. It's not such a clear quid pro quo, but they've been. Pam Bondi and Donald Trump have been close allies and surrogates for each other and supported each other. She was one of the big advocates for him throughout his campaign. She was a very loud spokesperson for him in the wake of the 2020 election and parroting a lot of the baseless claims of election fraud. That's another thing that people are rightfully raising their eyebrows about. She was also a registered foreign agent for the government of Qatar. And, when we're raising questions about Tulsi Gabbard, another Trump nominee for Director of National Intelligence, and where her allegiances lie, considering her many, many statements over the years that are viewed as, unduly sympathetic to, countries that are enemies of the United States, like Russia, and, her shrugging at the war crimes committed by Assad in Syria. Pam Bondi being a registered agent for a country like Qatar is problematic. And when she goes through her confirmation hearings, I expect even Republican senators to be asking her questions about that. But again, in the calculus of the Republican senators who are voting for the confirmation, they've already, stonewalled Gaetz out of the running. And Bondi was at least a Florida attorney general. She was a prosecutor. She's practiced law. She has far more experience. I think it's going to be a lot. I would find it highly unusual if she's the one that doesn't make it. I think Hegseth and Gabbard and Kennedy are far more likely to stumble along their path to nomination than Bondi.
So let's talk about Pete Hegseth. He was a Fox News personality, and a police report on a 2017 sexual assault allegation against him was released earlier this week, and the details are really disturbing. He denies the allegations, but this comes 1 week after Donald Trump nominated him to serve as his defense secretary. After seeing Matt Gaetz' fate, what do you think about Pete Hegseth?
Again, he's going to have a similar problem because this was something that was not disclosed to the Trump campaign. It was something that was not disclosed to Fox News, if he ever wants to go back there. Even so, when you look at the police report and you look at what Hegseth is claiming, the best case scenario, if you take what he's admitted to happening, is that while his third wife was home with their newborn child, who was conceived while he was still married to his second wife and the mother of, I think, 3 of his other children. While his wife was home with the baby, he was at a conference and he was hitting on 2 women who didn't want to get involved with him, and then took up with this other woman who he knew was married. That's not great, and that's not really anything that's morally upstanding. The real messy part of this is that the woman who has accused him of these things believes that she was drugged. She says she doesn't remember part of the evening, and the witness testimony of her smiling and walking along with him that actually could be a result of being drugged. I don't want to get into details because it's not my story to tell, but I've had friends in the past who have had their drinks spiked at bars. And one of them, I was with her when it happened, and I was able to get her home. And she was smiling and laughing until she felt very sick. So I've seen this for myself, that some of these drugs that can make you very ill and make you lose your memory and make you not able to, legally give consent to things that happen can have you standing and talking and laughing. So I personally find that heartbreaking and believable in her accusations. It's the whole thing is just very messy and disturbing. And again, the issue, the cover up is worse than the crime. What we do know is that Heth paid this woman and had her sign a non-disclosure agreement because he was worried it would mess up his employment with Fox. And the Trump campaign didn't apparently know about it beforehand either. So it's one of those things where it's like when you try to hide something that comes out, it's bigger and messier than when you tried to bury it in the first place. So it's not great.
Really messing, really disturbing allegations here. And your colleague, my former colleague, Colby Hall, wrote this for Mediate. Character matters. A serial philanderer accused of rape should come nowhere close to Secretary of Defense. Do these nominees show that character does not matter, or character does matter to a point, or character doesn't matter, but until the votes shape up the way they are, then character matters? What do you think?
I think we've seen, again, this is a case where what Trump can get away with, his support. If it was just a simple matter of an affair, that's a lot easier to shrug off. But a rape allegation that is messy and complicated and he took steps to conceal are a problem. And when you pair that with some of his controversial comments on television, on podcasts, the things he's written in his books, he takes a very hardline view that some critics have called sexist and misogynistic about women in the military. I've read excerpts of it. To be clear, I've not read the entire book, so I want to be very transparent about that. But the excerpts I've read, there were multiple sections where he describes the ideal soldier as a straight white man. That he questions the ability of women to be in combat. He questions the ability of women to serve at all. He questions having women in leadership. He derides the current leadership of the U.S. military as wanting to, if we can just get some Black lesbian women, promoted, then we've done our job. That's like a key goal. So over and over again, he said these things that are being criticized as sexist and misogynistic. And not, it's one thing to criticize military decision making as too politically correct or woke or whatever. It's a whole different thing if you're coming in acting like these people shouldn't be part of the military at all. Because the fact is that the U.S. military has had women in key roles. World War II, there was nurses and there were people working in the factories and there was a lot of support roles. And we've had women involved, for decades in the U.S. military. So this is not something that's getting unwound. And so to have somebody in there that is so hostile to that and questioning the ability of somebody to serve, combined with this very troubling, very disturbing rape allegation. And again, Colby's column about the very messy serial philandering. If I'm correct, I think wife number 3 was a Fox News producer on a show he was working on. Again, he was married with young children. It's messy. It's just messy. It's just, it's nothing anybody wants to cheer for.
And when you're looking at this entire cast of characters, if you will, you have someone like Senator Marco Rubio, who's nominated for Secretary of State. I was even talking to Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz yesterday, and she said, hey, I don't agree with him much on anything, but he has the experience. He's qualified for that role. And then you have someone like Pete Hegseth with this mess surrounding him. What do you think we can look forward to for the next 4 years based on who Trump is nominating for his cabinet?
That's another really good question. Rubio was, he had leadership in the Florida legislature. He has been a senator for a number of years. He's run for president. He has been part of the intelligence committees and has done a lot of overseas envoy work on behalf of the U.S. government. Fluent in Spanish, very familiar with the goings-on in Latin America. It's the kind of resume that you would expect a Secretary of State to have. So, Debbie Wasserman Schultz served with Rubio in the legislature. She knows him, so she will disagree with him on partisan political issues, but she knows he's intelligent. She knows that he is experienced. She knows about his ethics. She's probably met his family. It's not so much of a question. Hegseth, on the other hand, not going to criticize him for serving in the military, and he served in combat honorably. He got, honors and awards for that, but he only got to the rank of major. He has not. There's a leadership and an administrative aspect to this that is extremely complicated. The Pentagon oversees about 3 million people. When you add up the active duty personnel, the reservists, the National Guard, the civilian and military employees of the Pentagon itself, the intelligence agencies that fall under its umbrella, I mean, it's complicated. The budgets are complicated. The equipment management is complicated. This is not a job for a rookie. And there are valid calls for reform and, maybe budget efficiencies and things that need to be looked at with the Pentagon. But if you don't know anything about the building, anything about the administration of it, it's just really not a job for a rookie. So again, this is something that I am assuming the Democratic senators will be questioning all the nominees very heavily on. But I would hope that the Republican senators, especially those that have military experience themselves, especially those that have served on the intelligence committees and have experience in these areas. Any of them that have worked on the appropriations committees, the defense committees, they have more knowledge of these things and how they're working than Pete Hegseth would to try to lead the whole department. And I hope that they bring that experience to bear and they ask pointed, detailed questions.
Well, Sarah, there's certainly a lot to look out for as we see more of Trump's nominees as they go through their hearings and so forth. And I hope you come back on and break it down with me. Sarah Rumpf, per usual, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much, Brittany.